For decades, home coffee roasters have relied on the only hot air system that they could afford to roast coffee at home, and that is a traditional hot air popcorn popper. But now something new has come to town, and it is the popper from Sweet Maria's. They've taken the concept of a hot air popcorn popper and they've applied it to home coffee roasting, and we're going to talk about the features and benefits and do a roast here on this popper from Sweet Maria's. So stick around. All right, thank you for joining me here at the Virtual Coffee Lab. Right from the beginning of this video, you can see a clear difference between a traditional hot air popcorn popper and the popper from Sweet Maria's. There's a size difference. It's twice the size and it is twice the capacity. So while you may have been limited to 50 grams of coffee with a hot air popcorn system, the popper can hold up to and roast up to 100 grams of coffee. That's great news for a home coffee roaster, because that means less roasting at one time or less roasting for the week. And that's kind of exciting news. But does this popper give us anything else other than more capacity? And that's what we're going to take a look at today. If you've been using a hot air popper to roast coffee, it's been pretty challenging for you to have any ability to control temperature unless you've modified this. And that's what a lot of people are doing, is they're taking them apart and they're modifying them so that they can control the temperature and the air of the system. And that's what Sweet Maria's has done. They've taken that idea and instead of hacking a hot air popcorn popper, they've redesigned it, and it is exclusively for the home coffee roaster market. This is an interesting product because we now have control over the airflow as well as the temperature of the roaster. You'll see that there's 3 dials on the front of the roaster. The one in the middle is the timer. This timer maxes out at 10 minutes and it counts down during the roast. You'll start at 10 minutes or whatever time that you set, and when it gets down to the 3-minute mark, the heat of the roaster automatically turns off and it goes into the cool mode. So you can adjust that time during the roast. If you're getting close to 3 minutes, you would just turn it upward so that you can add more time to the roaster and continue to roast without it shutting down or cooling off. It's really important for us to know how our roasters perform so that we can then apply the right amount of heat during different roasting phases. The thing about the popper is that there are no markings to tell us what each of the turns of this dial represent. It starts, it's basically a 180-degree turn going from the 9 o'clock position all the way around to the 3 o'clock position. So what I did, and I'm going to show you this video, I mark the 10 o'clock position, the 11 o'clock, and the 12 o'clock, all the way to 3 o'clock. And at each of those o'clock positions, I took temperature readings so I knew what they were. So I'm going to use that as my basis for trying to control the temperature of the roaster during the roasting process. The fan, as you can see here, has a off, low, and a high setting. And I think for the most part, we're going to be using the high setting for just about everything that we do. Sweet Maria's had a demo of this, and they pretty much recommend just to leave it on high unless you're doing small batch roasts. And we're going to be roasting a 100-gram load, the fullest that this thing can handle, just to see how it performs. One other thing I forgot to mention, so this roaster's highest temperature reading was 423 degrees, I think, 417 or 423. And on the hot air popcorn popper that I had next to me earlier, that was in the high 380s, close to 390. So this is more powerful as far as heat goes, and I believe even airflow, it has a bigger fan system and it provides more air as well. It really has to, because if you're roasting twice as much coffee, then you need to be able to move that air. The whole idea of an air roaster system is to be able to use air to loft the coffee, to blow around the coffee, and so you'll see the coffee bouncing and moving around, and that's intentional. Air roasters use convection style heating, It is more efficient. It is a much more efficient style of heating than a drum roaster, and so it performs differently. And one of the obvious signs that we see is shorter roast times with an air roaster. One other thing, the noise difference between a traditional hot air popper and this popper from Sweet Maria's is nominal. There's not much of a difference in noise. With the fan on high, this read about 82 decibels in the low 80 decibel range, maybe 84, and the popper was within 1 or 2 points of that as well. This might have been just a shade quieter than a hot air popper. As far as the finishes for this roaster, it seems good quality. The latches here with this popper that come off are very durable. This hinge system, this is really interesting. You can look at this, it's hanging on here now, and that's because this chaff tray, which Sweet Maria's calls the slag tray, which I think that's for metal processing, that's molten pieces of molten metal. I could be wrong on that, but the chaff goes in this tray right here. There are little vent holes. There will be some chaff, little pieces that blow out the side, but it collects a lot of the chaff here. This is hanging on the front edge of this roaster, so you can see me open it up like this. But all I have to do is lift this off, and it's this ledge that is catching here on this roaster. It's pretty neat design. I would guess if you drop this on the floor, would it break? It is a thicker plastic or polycarbonate. I'm not sure what it's made of. It is a little thicker, but anything can break if you drop it on the floor. Plastic, it just takes the right angle, especially if it's cooler. It could break if you're not careful. So just be careful, take care of your roasting equipment. All right, I've got 100 grams of a Guatemalan coffee here that I'm going to put into the roaster, and then we'll get started. The top is a little fidgety sometimes, but it's easier than the B-more. Putting that drum in the B-more sometimes can be a little nerve-wracking. All right, so I have this mark set at 12 noon on the roaster. That's my heat. My timer set at 10 minutes, and I'm going to turn this on, and as soon as I turn this on, you're going to see that the roaster automatically starts to count down. That's kind of a nice feature. If I were to start it and then stop it instantly, it would count down like 1 second. The clock stops as well. So one other thing, safety thing, Sweet Maria says in their instructions that you should not turn the roaster off until it's gone through its cool cycle completely. So we're going to do that as well. Cool cycle will start at the 3-minute mark, and we will see how that all works out. So let's get going. All right, you can see that the clock is counting down, and I'll show you the air movement and how that influences the beans. You'll see there's some bean movement. The further we go into the roasting process, the more bean movement we'll see. One of the big topics for me with this roaster, I think there's going to be 2 topics. One is the heat going to be accurately consistent? So what I mean by that is 12 o'clock heat always going to remain the same, or is that going to alter? Does this thing turn on and off kind of without me really knowing it to maintain a certain temperature? I'm not quite exactly sure how that is. Do the coils glow just a little bit and stay at that rate to produce that amount of energy? I'm not quite sure how that technology works. If somebody is familiar with how these operate, then share those in the comments. That would be interesting to see. So the temperature control is one issue that I have. A little bit of chaff is starting to come off right now. And the beans are still moving, so we're doing good. So a little bit of chaff is coming out, so this does give off chaff. It will be a little messy, but that's kind of what home roasters are used to, is a little bit of chaff. You got to clean it up with a vacuum or something. The other thing I'm concerned about is the timer. So for me, I usually roast, when I'm charting all my roasts, I'm counting up, and this counts down. The Be-More counts down too, so I guess I can see how they thought about that. The part that's a little frustrating for me is that 10 minutes is not 10 minutes. It's really 7 minutes of roasting time and then 3 minutes of cool down for a total of 10 minutes. So I have to be very careful not to let this get too close to 3 minutes, or else it'll go into the cool cycle, and I don't want it to do that. The good news is that if it goes into the cool and you just see it, you can quickly turn the knob, go up above 3 minutes, and then the heat turns back on. All right, I've got a little bit of paling going on. Beans are starting to pale. You can see the chaff blowing off a little bit. A little more movement. That's a good sign. All right, so the clock is showing 6 minutes and 20 seconds right now. That's 4 minutes. 4 minutes and 20 seconds into the roast. Is it? Oh, it's counting. See, that's what's confusing. So we're going to be at the 6 minute mark here. That's our 4 minute mark with the roast. And we're not going to make the 4 minute on dry, so our target is going to be 5 minutes. And I think I'm going to turn the temperature up just a little bit. All right, I turned the temperature up to 1230 on the dial here. And we've got about 35 seconds before we get to the 5 minute dry. I'm going to move it to the 1 o'clock mark. All right, we're going to miss our 5 minute time as well. Definitely have paling going on. And we will see, I think probably in the next 30 seconds, 40 seconds, we'll hit dry. You can see the color change. Definitely moving towards dry now. More chaff coming off. All right, I think we're going to hit dry at 6 minutes. We're almost there. Just a smidge more. And I'm going to call that dry. So dry end was at 6 minutes and 45 seconds. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my timer back to the 10 minute mark. So it's going to be like 9:45 by the time I get to this. All right, we'll just say that that's about right. So 6 minutes and 40 seconds dry end. And I want to be careful not to blow through this too quick. So that means I'm going to have a 12-minute, 13-minute roast. And if I break 640 in half, 25% is going to be 320. So I want probably a 340 for my brown phase. 340. All right, so if I want 340 for my brown phase, so subtract that by 10, that's 620. So when this reaches 620, I should be at first crack. And I'm going to slow this down. I moved it to the 12 o'clock mark because I don't want this to go too fast. I want this to count down to the 640 time. And that's what I mean, the clock, for me, it's a little difficult to figure out my phase times. I just have to do some subtraction, I guess. It's not that big of a deal. A lot of the chaff is being collected in here. And we are on our way to first crack. So I've got about a minute to get the first crack. And based upon how that looks, I'm going to need to increase the temperature just a tad. So I'm going to move this to the 1 o'clock position. And I'm going to move it to the 1:30 position. So I mentioned the timer. I mentioned the temperature. The other thing that I'm not a real fan of is the yellow tint on the cover here. I don't know why they made it yellow. I prefer clear. It helps me see the color better. All right, we are at 640 and we're not at first crack. I'm going to turn this up to 2. There's first crack. Well, it's an outlier. As soon as first crack starts, I'm going to back the heat down to stretch out my development time a little bit. All right, that's first crack. And that's at 6:10. So that's 3 minutes and 50 seconds. Oh, and I wanted 340. 3 minutes and 50 seconds. It happened at 6:10. Oh, I'm moving it back to 1 because I'm stalling. Don't want it to stall. All right, first crack is rolling along now. I want to keep first crack going. And then that's 5 minutes, so 6:40. So what do I want here for my time for development? I want 6:10 was first crack. That was 350. 340. 3 minutes. I want 3 minutes. So that's 3:10. So I may let this go. Okay, I'm gonna let this go all the way to cool. Now you can really see it moving. All right, we're fully in the development phase here. Yep. All right. There's the time. So this is definitely challenging because this part, I'm still a little confused on my times because of the way that this is all figured out. And I think what I want to do is I'm going to let this development go for about 5 more seconds, and then I'm going to move it into the cool. All right. So it would have hit 3 minutes and then automatically went into the cool cycle. So now it's cooling. Now during my tests, this was really interesting. When it was empty, this thing dropped 150 degrees in 30 seconds. I realize I have hot beans in here, so it's going to take a little longer. But the cooling cycle works pretty well on this unit. You have to anticipate that a little bit ahead of time. I probably should have stopped or started the cooling cycle about 15 seconds earlier in my roast, but I didn't. First time roasting coffee on this thing, so. All right, so the whole time that it's in the cool mode, the beans are still being thrown around. Cool air, I can put my hand here and it's not burning my hand. It's still hot. So I've got chaff. Here. I've got chaff inside this tray. So the nice part is that it doesn't, when I take this off, it doesn't go all over the place. So I'm going to take this and dump it in the garbage. The yellow tinged top is hot, but it's not real hot. The black plastic, what Sweet Maria's calls the slag tray, feels like hot slag. It's really hot. It feels like hot metal. But yeah, so I emptied this out. This is cleaned up and done. That's kind of nice. All right. So we can see a few beans that are a little lighter. And this has chaff on it. So these are like Quaker type. The light ones are maybe Quaker type, less moisture in them, like this. But fairly even roast, and that's kind of expected for a hot air popper. These lighter ones, again, are more Quakers in this coffee. This was my first real attempt at getting the phases right, and I got somewhat close, although my total roast time was longer than I wanted it. So this is what I would call a very medium roast. That's probably the best way to explain that, is it's a very medium roast. I have no way to judge the temperature of it just because there's no temperature readings. I don't have a probe in there to know what the temperature of the bean mass is. But I would say all in all, that is a pretty good roast for the first time. And as far as the range of power goes, there's plenty of horsepower here in this roaster. That's a great thing. The cool down phase has to be anticipated just like on the Beemore because you've got a really hot roasting chamber. You're not supposed to turn this roaster off. I know a lot of us that have Beemores will shut it off, open the door, pull out the drum and dump the coffee and get it cooled. If you wanted to, you could let this go into the cool mode, take the top off, pour it into your sieve or whatever it is you're using to cool your beans, and let this continue to roast, or let it continue to cool, and that would be in keeping with Sweet Maria's suggestion that you do not turn the roaster off. You let it go through its cool down process to help save the circuitry, the electronics of the roaster. All right, well, that's a very interesting first roast. I think what we're going to do is next week we're going to have 2 different roasts. We're going to try to do something a little lighter than this, and then I think we're going to try to go for an espresso roast. How does that sound? So I appreciate you joining me today. If you like what you saw, hit the like button. If you're not subscribed to my channel, or if you think you're subscribed to my channel, double check, because YouTube has gone through a lot of the channels and they have pulled people off that had subscribed at one point and are no longer subscribed. I'm not sure that's the case with my channel, but just check. And if you aren't subscribed, please do that. I would really appreciate it. That helps me out a lot. If you have a popper, I would love to hear your feedback. I was talking with one person on the channel here, and they had a popper, and they were measuring their power in, I don't know, it was wattage or some sort of voltage. They were able to measure it somehow. So I'm interested in hearing about that. Also, your experiences with the popper. First impressions are, it seems like a pretty good quality product. I didn't tell you the price. This is $89 or something like that plus shipping. So for under $100, you're going to get a roaster that you have the ability to control temperatures. How accurately, I think that's going to take practice. The timer is something I'm just going to have to get used to, and then we just need to watch color. I wish that lid was clear, but it's not. That might be something for Sweet Maria's to think about. They may have a reason for it, I don't know. But all in all, I'm happy with the popper so far. We're going to give a few more roasts on the next time we do this, and I appreciate you guys watching. Leave your comments, let me know what you think, and we'll see you next week. I hope you have a great week roasting. See ya.